A desperate single mother buys a forgotten, decaying ghost town for exactly $50. It was supposed to be a place to hide, but when black SUVs started circling her rotting property, she realized she hadn't just bought dirt. She was sitting on a $500 million secret. Emma Collins had exactly $412 to her name when she walked into the Chaffee County Courthouse. At 34, she was a woman hollowed out by a brutal, drawn-out divorce. Her ex-husband, a charismatic investment banker, hadn't just broken her heart. He had systematically drained their joint accounts, hidden the assets in a maze of offshore shell companies, and left her holding the bag for massive debts. Emma, ironically, a former forensic auditor, had been too close to the blast radius to see the bomb ticking in her own marriage. Now she was sleeping in a cramped 2008 Honda Civic with her 7-year-old daughter, Elena. The Denver shelters were full, the winter winds were beginning to bite, and desperation had become a physical weight on her chest. She was at the courthouse to look for tax-delinquent properties, a desperate Hail Mary attempt to find a miserable slice of land where she could legally park her car without the police tapping on her window at 3 a.m. The county was hosting a public auction for abandoned parcels. Most were snapped up by wealthy developers or local ranchers. Emma sat in the back row clutching Elena's hand, watching parcels go for tens of thousands of dollars. Then the auctioneer, a weary-looking man named Walter Hayes, adjusted his glasses and pulled up a faded, sepia-toned slide on the projector. Parcel 409. Walter droned his voice, lacking any enthusiasm. The former township of Ash Creek, 312 acres of unzoned condemned land in the upper ridges of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, includes 14 decaying structures, a collapsed chapel, and a whole lot of rattlesnakes. The county holds a lien for unpaid taxes dating back to 1982. Opening bid to clear the administrative fees, $50. Silence fell over the room. Several developers in the front row chuckled. Ash Creek wasn't just a ghost town. It was a hazardous waste nightmare rumored to be built on an unstable network of exhausted silver mines from the 1890s. It was a liability miles from the nearest paved road. "Do I hear 50?" Walter asked, looking ready to move on. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. 300 acres. Nobody could tell her to move her car on 300 acres. Her hand shot up before her rational brain could stop it. Walter blinked. "I have $50 from the young lady in the back. Any other bids?" The room remained dead silent. Going once. Going twice. Sold. For the price of a tank of gas, Emma Collins had just bought an entire town. 2 days later, the Honda Civic groaned as it crawled up the treacherous, unpaved switchbacks leading to Ash Creek. The elevation was dizzying. As they crested the final ridge, the town revealed itself like a rotting corpse baking in the late afternoon sun. It was utterly terrifying. Skeletal wooden frames leaned precariously against the wind. The old assayer's office had entirely collapsed in on itself, and the remains of a Victorian-style saloon stood with its doors swinging eerily on rusted hinges. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whistling wind and the crunch of Emma's tires. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a graveyard. "Mummy, I don't like it here," Elena whispered from the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "It's just for a little while, baby." Emma lied smoothly, trying to mask her own rising panic. "We're going to camp." They spent the first night locked inside the car parked in the center of what used to be Main Street. As darkness swallowed the mountain, the temperature plummeted. Emma wrapped Eleanor in every blanket they owned. She lay awake, staring at the jagged silhouettes of the buildings against the moonlight, listening to the wood groan and settle. At 2:14 a.m., the absolute darkness was shattered. Emma jolted awake. Intense, blinding white light flooded the interior of the Honda. She threw her arm over Elena's eyes and squinted through the windshield. Two heavy-duty matte black SUVs had silently rolled up the dirt road and were parked 50 yards away. Their high beams were locked dead on Emma's car. Panic seized her throat. She fumbled for the keys in the ignition, her hands shaking so violently she dropped them between the seats. She was miles from civilization, no cell service, completely defenseless. A tall figure stepped out of the lead SUV. He didn't approach. He just stood there, a dark silhouette against the glaring halogen lights, watching the Honda. He raised a hand, took out a phone, and seemed to take a picture of her license plate. Then, without a word, he got back into the SUV. Both vehicles reversed smoothly, turned around, and disappeared down the mountain, their tail lights fading into the black pines. Emma didn't sleep the rest of the night. Her auditor's brain was already working, pushing past the terror. People didn't drive custom off-road vehicles up a treacherous mountain at 2 a.m. just to stargaze. They were looking for something, and they were shocked to find someone else already there. The morning sun brought a deceptive warmth to Ash Creek, but it did nothing to melt the ice in Emma's veins. She stepped out of the car, the dry mountain air stinging her lungs, and walked over to where the SUVs had parked. The tire tracks were deep, aggressive, and fresh. But what caught her eye was the ground near the tracks. Footprints, heavy, tactical boots. But they didn't just walk toward her car. A second set of prints led away from the vehicles, heading directly toward the collapsed ruins of the old saloon. "Stay in the car, Elena. Lock the doors." Emma instructed, her voice tight. She followed the prints. The saloon was a death trap of rotting floorboards and rusted nails. The tracks led to the back room, what would have been a storage area or an illegal gambling den in 1895. The dust in the room was thick, but right in the center of the floor the heavy layer of dirt had been swept away. Emma crouched down. The floorboards here had been pried up and neatly replaced. Before she could investigate further, the roar of a high-performance engine echoed up the canyon. Emma rushed back to the street just as a silver Mercedes G-Wagon pulled into the town square, kicking up a cloud of dust. A man stepped out. He wasn't the shadowy figure from the night before. This man was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma's entire college education. He had slicked back grey hair, a perfectly trimmed beard, and a smile that didn't reach his cold reptilian eyes. "Ms. Collins, I presume." He called out, his voice smooth and practiced. Emma crossed her arms, standing firmly between him and the Honda. "Who are you?" "My name is David Corwin. I represent Vanguard Holdings. I apologize for dropping in unannounced, but the county clerk informed me the property transferred hands yesterday. You beat us to the auction by a matter of minutes." Corwin walked slowly, examining the rotting buildings with absolute disgust. "I'll cut right to the chase, Miss Collins. My clients own the land, abutting this parcel to the north. We want to build a private eco-resort. This eyesore is in our way. I'm authorized to offer you $10,000 right now in certified funds to sign the deed over." Emma's forensic mind clicked into overdrive. Vanguard Holdings, a shell company name if she'd ever heard one. Eco-resort on a toxic, waterless, condemned silver mine. It was a laughable lie. 10,000. Emma repeated, her face utterly blank. She remembered the black SUVs. They had already been surveying the land. They owned the north parcel, but they needed this one desperately. "For a property you could have bought for $50 yesterday." Corwin offered a tight, patronizing smile. "Clerical error on our end. Someone forgot to file the paperwork for the auction. We're offering you a phenomenal return on your investment, Ms. Collins. You take the 10 grand, you drive down this mountain, and you start a nice life for you and your daughter." He looked at Elena in the car. It was a subtle, terrifying glance. "I'm an auditor, Mr. Corwin," Emma said, her voice dropping an octave. "I spent 10 years dismantling corporate shell games. I know a panic buy when I see one. You're not building a resort. You want what's underneath it." Corwin's smile vanished. The mask slipped, revealing something deeply ruthless underneath. He took a step closer, invading her space. 25,000. And that is the ceiling, Ms. Collins. Look around you. The structures are condemned. The county will hit you with hazardous waste cleanup fines by next month that will bankrupt you forever. Take the money. This mountain is not a place for a lonely woman and a little girl. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "Get off my property," Emma said. Corwin stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. "You are making a catastrophic mistake," he whispered. He turned on his heel, got into the G-Wagon, and sped away, leaving Emma trembling in the dust. She knew she had just declared war on a ghost. $25,000 was life-changing money. She could have taken it. But Corwin's desperation proved one thing: whatever was in Ash Creek was worth exponentially more. She immediately went back to the saloon. She grabbed a rusted tire iron from her trunk and marched into the back room. With gritted teeth, she jammed the iron under the disturbed floorboards and heaved. The old wood splintered and cracked with a violent shriek. Beneath the boards was a heavy iron grate nearly 4 feet wide, and right in the center of it was a modern, heavy-duty master lock. It was newly installed, the brass shining against the rusted iron. The men from the SUVs had been down here. Emma's adrenaline surged. She brought the tire iron down on the padlock with all her strength. Once, twice. On the 5th agonizing strike, the brass casing shattered. She pulled the heavy iron grate open. A blast of freezing, stale air rushed up from the darkness, carrying the faint, metallic scent of deep earth. She clicked on her heavy maglite and shined the beam downward. It wasn't a crumbling 19th-century shaft. The first 20 feet of the mine had been historically preserved in timber, but below that the light caught the glint of modern engineering. Fresh steel support beams, thick yellow power cables running down the rock wall. Someone had spent millions of dollars secretly retrofitting the long-abandoned Ash Creek mine. "Mommy!" Elena's voice called out from the saloon entrance. "Stay back, honey," Emma said, her eyes fixed on the darkness. "Mommy has to check the basement." Emma tested the metal rung of the ladder bolted to the wall. It held. Taking a deep breath, she began the long descent into the earth. The temperature dropped 10 degrees for every few yards she climbed down. At 50 feet, the shaft opened up into a massive cavernous drift. Emma's boots hit the solid rock floor. She swept her flashlight around the subterranean room. There were folded portable tables, high-powered lithium battery packs, and heavy drilling equipment stamped with a logo she recognized instantly: Apex Minerals, the largest, most ruthless, rare earth mining conglomerate in North America. Vanguard Holdings was just a front, but it was what was on the tables that made her blood run cold. Lying open on a metal desk were dozens of core samples, cylinders of rock pulled from deep within the mountain. But these weren't silver. Emma walked over, shining her light on the stones. They were streaked with a brilliant, shimmering white-purple hue. Alongside them was a highly classified geological survey report, stamped with the Apex logo. Emma picked up the report. Her eyes scanned the technical jargon, landing on the executive summary. Her breath caught in her throat. Target element: high-grade spodumene lithium. Estimated deposit: volume 14.2 million tons. Estimated market valuation: $520 million US. Ash Creek wasn't a dead silver mine. Beneath the historic shafts lay one of the largest untouched veins of lithium, the critical component for electric car batteries in the Western Hemisphere. Apex Minerals had found it, secretly mapped it illegally, and was waiting for the tax auction to buy the land for pennies. And Emma had beaten them by $50. Suddenly, a harsh, metallic clang echoed from the top of the shaft. Emma froze. The heavy iron grate above her slammed shut, plunging the shaft into terrifying acoustic darkness. The distinct sound of a new padlock clicking into place echoed down the metal tunnel. "Hey!" Emma screamed, her voice cracking as she lunged for the ladder. "Hey, my daughter is up there!" A man's voice drifted down from the surface, muffled but brutally clear. It was Corwin. "I warned you about the hazards of this mountain, Miss Collins. Tragic things happen in abandoned mines. Don't worry. The little girl will be delivered to child services. But you are never seeing the sun again." The metallic echo of the padlock snapping shut resonated through the subterranean chamber like a gunshot. Then came the terrifying, absolute silence of the earth. Emma stood frozen at the base of the shaft. The reality of her situation hit her with the physical force of a freight train. She was buried 50 feet underground in a condemned silver mine, miles from civilization. And above her, a ruthless corporate fixer was hunting her 7-year-old daughter. "Elena!" Emma screamed, her voice tearing at her throat, but the thick rock absorbed the sound instantly. Panic, raw and blinding, threatened to pull her under. Her knees buckled, and she fell against the cold, damp stone wall. She could picture Corwin finding Eleanor in the car. She could picture the black SUVs rolling down the mountain, leaving her to suffocate in the dark. No. Emma slammed her fist against the rock, the sharp pain cutting through the hysteria. She was a forensic auditor. Her entire career had been built on dissecting complex, seemingly inescapable traps constructed by powerful men. Corwin thought she was just a desperate, broke single mother. He didn't realize he had just locked a woman with a lethal survival instinct inside a room full of high-tech mining equipment. She clicked her maglite back on. The beam sliced through the dust. She turned her attention to the folding metal desk. The classified geological survey, the proof of the $520 million lithium deposit, was still sitting there. Emma folded the thick document and shoved it deep into the inside pocket of her heavy winter coat. She zipped it all the way to her chin. If she was getting out of here, she was taking the ultimate leverage with her. She scanned the cavern. Apex Minerals had hauled down heavy gear, lithium battery packs, halogen work lights, and a massive industrial-grade pneumatic rock drill. Emma dragged the heavy drill toward the base of the ladder. She connected the thick yellow power cable to the largest portable lithium battery pack on the floor. It was a 48-volt high-capacity unit. She threw the breaker on the battery. The green power indicator lit up, casting an eerie glow on the cavern floor. She hauled the drill up the metal rungs of the ladder, the sheer weight of the machine tearing the muscles in her shoulders. When she reached the top, she braced her back against the narrow dirt wall and aimed the drill's titanium bit directly at the heavy iron hinges holding the grate in place. She squeezed the trigger. The noise was deafening, a violent, bone-rattling roar that shook the very foundations of the shaft. Dust and sharp fragments of rock rained down on her face, blinding her. She kept the trigger engaged, screaming against the vibrations, forcing the spinning titanium bit into the rusted iron and the surrounding stone. Sparks flew in a blinding shower. For 5 agonizing minutes, she drilled her arms, burning with lactic acid, her grip failing. Finally, with a sharp crack, the stone anchoring the left hinge gave way. Emma dropped the heavy drill. It plummeted to the cavern floor with a crash. She shoved her bloody hands against the iron grate and heaved upward with every ounce of strength she possessed left. The broken grate groaned, shifted, and flipped backward. Cold mountain air hit her face. She scrambled out of the hole, collapsing onto the dusty floor of the ruined saloon. Her hands were torn and bleeding, her clothes caked in dirt, but she was out. She stumbled to her feet and ran toward the front of the saloon, peering through the broken slats of the window. The sun was beginning to dip below the jagged peaks, casting long, bloody shadows across the ghost town. The silver Mercedes G-Wagon was still parked in the center of the street, but Corwin wasn't in it. Emma's eyes darted toward the Honda Civic. The doors were wide open. The back seat was empty. "Eleanor!" Emma whispered, her blood running cold. She slipped out the back of the saloon, keeping low to the ground, using the rotting structures as cover. She moved toward the old assayer's office. As she rounded the corner, she heard a voice. "Come out, little girl. We just want to take you to your mother." It was one of the men from the black SUVs. He was walking slowly through the tall dead grass near the collapsed chapel, holding a heavy mag light and a suppressed handgun. Corwin was standing near the G-Wagon, furiously typing on a satellite phone. They didn't have her. Elena had run. Emma knew her daughter. Whenever Elena was scared at home during the screaming matches with her ex-husband, she never hid under the bed. She always climbed. She always went to the highest point she could find. Emma's eyes shot up. The old wooden water tower stood at the far edge of the town, leaning precariously against the wind. Moving with the silence of a ghost, Emma crept around the perimeter of the town. She waited until the armed man turned his back to inspect a ruined cabin, then sprinted across the open ground, diving behind the thick wooden pylons of the water tower. She looked up. Through the slats of the rotting wooden platform, 50 feet in the air, she saw a tiny flash of a pink winter coat. Emma climbed the rusted exterior ladder, praying the ancient bolts would hold. When she breached the platform, she found Elena huddled in the corner, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her face pale and streaked with tears. Elena gasped, but before she could cry out, Emma clamped a dirt-covered hand over her mouth. "Shh!" Emma breathed, pulling her daughter into a fierce, crushing hug. "Mommy's here. I've got you. We have to be completely silent." From their vantage point, Emma looked down at the town square. Corwin was pacing, clearly agitated. "Forget the kid for a second," Corwin barked at his man. "Bring the thermite. We need to permanently seal that grate before the county inspector comes sniffing around on Monday. No one can know that Shaft is active." Emma's eyes locked onto the Mercedes G-Wagon. The engine was still idling. The keys were inside. They couldn't take the Honda. Corwin's men had likely slashed the tires or pulled the spark plugs. The G-Wagon was their only way off the mountain. "Elena, listen to me," Emma whispered, looking her daughter dead in the eyes. "We are going to climb down. We are going to run to that shiny silver car. You get in the back floorboard, and you do not look up. Do you understand?" Elena nodded, terrified but resolute. They descended the ladder. Emma timed their movements with the howling wind. Corwin and his men were walking toward the saloon, carrying a heavy metal lockbox. This was it. Emma grabbed Elena's hand and broke cover. They sprinted across the dusty street. Every step felt like a mile. 10 yards. 5 yards. Emma yanked the heavy door of the G-Wagon open and shoved Eleanor into the back. She jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and threw the massive SUV into drive. Corwin spun around at the sound of the slamming doors. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock as he saw the woman he had buried alive sitting behind the wheel of his car. "Hey!" Corwin screamed, reaching into his jacket. Emma didn't flinch. She stomped the accelerator to the floorboards. The V8 engine roared like a caged beast, all 4 tires biting into the dirt. The massive SUV launched forward, missing Corwin by inches as he dove into the dirt to avoid being crushed. Gunfire cracked in the air. 2 bullets shattered the rear window, spraying glass over the back seat, but Eleanor was safely tucked on the floorboards. Emma gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white as she hit the treacherous switchbacks at 60 miles an hour, flying down the mountain, leaving Ash Creek and the nightmare behind her in a cloud of thick dust. Emma didn't stop driving until she hit the paved highway of Route 285. She pushed the stolen G-Wagon to 90 miles an hour, her hands shaking so violently she could barely keep the vehicle straight. She checked the rearview mirror obsessively, but the black SUVs were nowhere in sight. They couldn't catch her. She pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a massive truck stop just outside of Denver. It was 9 p.m. "You can sit up now, baby," Emma said softly, turning to the back seat. Eleanor peeked her head up, brushing shattered safety glass off her pink coat. Emma unzipped her jacket and pulled out the geological survey. It was crumpled and stained with dirt, but the Apex Minerals logo and the $520 million valuation were clear as day. She knew what Corwin would do next. He would call the local police. He would report his vehicle stolen by a crazy armed woman. If the local sheriff in Chaffee County was on Apex's payroll, and given how smoothly the auction was supposed to go, he likely was, Emma would be arrested, the survey would be confiscated as evidence, and she would disappear into the penal system forever. She couldn't go to the local cops. She had to go nuclear. Emma locked the doors, turned on the dome light, and dug Corwin's satellite phone out of the center console. She didn't dial 911. She dialed a number she knew by heart from her days as an auditor. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC Whistleblower Hotline in Washington, D.C. "SEC, tip line, this is Agent Miller," a tired voice answered. "My name is Emma Collins." Emma said, her voice dropping into the cold, calculated tone of a forensic accountant. "I am calling to report a massive active violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act Section 409 regarding the failure to disclose material events to shareholders. The offending entity is Apex Minerals, a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange." Agent Miller paused. "Ma'am, this line is for serious tips, not. Apex Minerals has illegally mapped and suppressed a high-grade lithium deposit valued at $520 million. Emma interrupted, reading directly from the report. They utilized an unregistered shell company, Vanguard Holdings, to attempt to acquire the land at a tax auction, to keep the asset off their quarterly disclosures and manipulate their stock price. I have the classified core sample analysis, the internal emails, and the geological surveys stamped by their chief geologist." Silence on the other end. "Where are you, Ms. Collins?" "I'm currently sitting in the stolen vehicle of their fixer, David Corwin, who just tried to bury me alive in the mine shaft on my property," Emma said. "I also need you to patch me through to the FBI field office in Denver. I want protective custody for my daughter and myself, and I want an immediate federal injunction placed on parcel 409 in Chaffee County. If I do not have federal agents at my location in 20 minutes, I am taking this survey directly to the Wall Street Journal." Checkmate. Within 15 minutes, the truck stop was swarming with unmarked federal vehicles. The fallout was catastrophic and swift. The FBI raided Vanguard Holdings' makeshift offices and arrested Corwin at a motel at the base of the mountain before he could flee the state. When the SEC opened its investigation into Apex Minerals, Wall Street panicked. The stock tanked the CEO was forced to resign under threat of federal indictment for securities fraud, and the Department of the Interior seized all of Apex's illegal drilling equipment at Ash Creek. But the land, the 312 acres of rotting wood rattlesnakes, and the $500 million mountain of lithium still legally belonged to Emma Collins. 6 months later, Emma sat in a pristine, glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of a Denver skyscraper. She wore a tailored slate-gray suit, her hair perfectly styled. Across from her sat the executive board of Piedmont Lithium, one of the largest heavily regulated battery manufacturers in the world. Ms. Collins, the CEO of Piedmont, said, sliding a thick contract across the mahogany table. We have reviewed the federal surveys. We are prepared to offer you an outright buyout of the mineral rights for parcel 409. The sum is $215 million post-tax wired directly to your accounts today, plus a 2% royalty on all gross yields for the lifetime of the mine. Emma looked at the contract. She picked up a heavy Mont Blanc pen. And the surface land? Emma asked. As requested, the surface deed remains completely in your name. The CEO confirmed. We will build our access roads around the historical structures. The ghost town is yours. Emma signed her name with a steady hand. She walked out of the skyscraper and into the bright Colorado sunshine. A sleek black armored SUV was waiting at the curb, a private security detail standing by the open door. Inside the spacious back seat, Elena was playing a video game, safe, happy, and entirely oblivious to the fact that her mother was now one of the wealthiest women in the state. Emma had bought a nightmare for $50. She had survived the dark, outsmarted the wolves, and sold the buried treasure for $250 million. But she was never going to sell the surface. Ash Creek was hers. It was a reminder that no matter how deep they try to bury you, if you have the right leverage, you can blow the whole mountain apart. What would you do if you bought a $50 ghost town and discovered a $500 million secret underneath it? Emma's terrifying journey from a desperate single mother to a brilliantly ruthless billionaire proves that the ultimate weapon isn't a gun. It's knowing how to outsmart the system. If this insane, true-life survival story had your heart pounding, smash that. Like button, share this video with a friend who loves a massive plot twist, and subscribe for more incredible real-life mysteries